I decided to make a video to help you guys out a little bit with getting your data sorted out for all this year and next year for ag science, doing some statistical analysis, and I'm not going to win any acting awards with this, but hopefully this will help you out and visualize what I'm doing and how to lay it out well to help yourself. One of the keys to doing good data analysis is to set up the tables in a way that you can use them. So this is the fertilizer trial, just using little radish plants and done over a number of days. I borrowed a student's basic data and then I've modified it so I can then use it to get some descriptive statistics, and then we're going to be able to use those in our reports to graph them up and to show what's going on growth-wise, whether there's a relationship between the variables, and how confident we are with that. So here what I've done just to show you, I always seem to, when I do mine, I always like to leave some cells, a column and a row here just to make it clean if I want to cut and snip these out. I try to use in my home here, the formatting, I try to do a center of the actual cell and I try to center the text. That's not always going to work, but it's what's worked for me. So for mine, we have 3 groups. We have a control group, which has 0 fertilizer. I probably should have capitalized that C to make a much neat and tidier. We have a group 2 with 100% fertilizer, and then group 3. Down there we have the day, so you'll see why I want that in a minute. I have each plant individually marked, or each pot. I have plant 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so there are 5 replications or trials within each group. We've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 10, 11, 12 for the third group. We'll be looking for the mean or the average for each of these plants for each of the measuring periods, which in this case we'll do it on a certain date. We'll measure the height in centimeters, and I'm going to call the first one day 0. So I'm going to be looking at the growth over a certain number of days, which in this case is 15. And what it does is it allows me to then select rows and columns to graph a little later on. I'm going to show you how I calculated the mean, the standard error, and the standard deviation. Remembering the standard error gives you the error above and below the mean. And that deviation is, standard deviation is how tight the data is packed around the mean itself and not how spread out it is. And we'll be able to use that for some analysis. So each day, I've put in the data for each plant. Each plant you can see here, a couple of ways you can look at it. You can see how this plant changed over time. Not all plants did the same. And there's quite a bit of variation within this, as you can see here. So it'll be interesting to see how our data turns up. This is for our control group, so no fertilizer at all. In this case, the student actually used a potting mix that had fertilizer already in it, which probably shouldn't have happened, but it gives us something to talk about anyway. So maybe these will be over fertilized, so these will nearly be 200 and 300%. But at the time, this was genuinely done the correct way. So here we'll look at again fertilizer 2. If I just quickly look at the data over time, I should see, you would predict that there'd be an increase from germination through to the 15th day. In this case, you have got an increase. And then we've got increases going on here for the most part. This one's increased and then decreased. But we will have to look at some of the averages, which is why we do some averages, to see if there's a trend or a pattern going on with the data. And then we'll look at plant 3 as well. So to get this, there's a couple of easy ways of doing it. Now, what I've done is I've reduced it down to only looking for the mean, the standard error, and the standard deviation. There's an analysis pack that you can use on Excel that'll give you this data, and it'll put it into a separate sheet, and then you've got to cut and paste it into here. Otherwise, there'll be just too much there, and it gets very confusing. So I'm going to show you, this will do for grade 11 and 12, and I've done that in consultation with our confirmer here, Mrs. Malloy, who confirmed with me that this was the way to go. Okay, so how did I get that mean, standard deviation, and error? Well, the first thing I did was I went to File, I went to Options, and I went to Add-ins and made sure that I have the Analysis Tool Pack actually active. Now, it could have been in here, originally it was, so to get it in, I went down to Manage, and I went to Go, and I clicked on Analysis Tool Pack, and I clicked OK. And that puts it, just to double check, back in here for add-ins, up the top. So I've got Analysis Tool Pack available. Now, to get that, I go to Data, and this is the area where there's all sorts of data queries you can make, but right over the right-hand side under Analysis now, I have a thing called Data Analysis. So what we're going to do, there's a whole bunch of statistics in here. There's even correlations, a whole bunch of bits and pieces. Now, you can easily get yourself in trouble by not knowing what you're doing. We're going to stick with descriptive statistics for the moment. I may show you for advanced students a few other little tricks in here as well, but I don't want to confuse people. Statistics is a whole subject in itself, and most university students don't understand it, so I'm not expecting you to get too far into it. Let's use the descriptive for us. We'll click OK, and you'll get a usual box like this, and then it's going to ask you to put in a range of data. Most Excel graphs work the same way. To do that, you just click on here, and this is basically what data am I going to do? Well, the only way you can do that is to compare the statistics for the same day. So for all of day 4 here, oops, I don't want day 4, I lie. I am actually going to put in day 8 because I've already done day 4. So I've got my 5 plants for this day, and I'm going to see for that day what sort of spread I've got over those plants for this control group. So I've got 5 plants representing the control group. I want to get the mean for that day, the standard error for that day, and the standard deviation. So to do that, I've done that. I'm going to click on that again. It puts me back to here. I'm going to leave it grouped as columns. I'm going to leave it as a new worksheet. What that does is it's going to pop up a new worksheet down the bottom here, which I'll use and then delete. That's probably what my sheet 2 is at the moment. And I've clicked on Summary Statistics, and I've got a confidence level there as well, but at the moment that's not what I'm interested in. I'm going to click OK, and you can see it's popped up a new sheet, sheet 3. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the mean and the standard error and the standard deviation. I'm going to cut and paste that, so Control C. Go to my fertilizer trial. I'm going to then put Control V, and then go back to my sheet 3 and then get the standard deviation and do Control C again for copy and Control V for paste. Now notice the way it's got all the numbers in there. In fact, I made a bit of a mistake there. So this is a great example of what happens if you just do Control C, Control V. So I'm actually going to take it back and remove those and show you a trick up here in the home here with pasting, okay? So since I had the standard deviation last, I'll do that one. If you just want plain numbers to go in, you can come in here and just select pure values. And you'll see, actually, I have the mean and standard deviation. If I put that in there, you'll see it comes in, and it's actually got the same formatting of the cells. And I'll show you how I formatted those in a second. You can also do the same for plain text as well, but I'm just doing the numbers. Oops, looks like I've repeated what I was doing. So I'm going to delete those and just double check with my sheet 3 to make sure I have the right standard deviation, which I did not. So I'll do copy, and then over here I'm going to put in just the value. Okay, so how do I get it to just 2 decimal places? Well, what I did is I went and selected all the data area here. I went to number, clicked on number again, and I selected 2 decimal places. So no matter how long it gets, it's just going to go to 2 decimal places for me. Just going to double check that again to make sure I got this right. 7.44 and 1.8, 1.08. So it's rounded up to 1.11. So that's correct. So I'm going to save that. Okay, I'm going to do it again here. So I can actually get rid of sheet 3. We don't need any other information off that. So I can delete it. I'm going to do the same for sheet 2, which is the one I did before for day 4. I'm going to delete that. Sheet 1 I'm going to leave there because I have a little bit of a different file on that, so I'm just going to leave it for the moment, some data. And I'm going to do it again just to show you again how we're going to do this. Now it takes a little bit of time to fiddle around, but good work here produces high quality output when you transform this into graphs, and good for analysis. It actually doesn't take as long as it looks. It's just because I'm talking a lot. Okay, so let's do one more run here. I'm going to do day 15. In fact, I really don't want that as 2 decimal places here. I've done that when I was showing you. So I'm going to go here and just set that to 1 decimal place, 0 decimal places, so the day is just 0, 4, 8, and 15. Right, let's do it again. We're going to analyze the plants for the day to get the average or the mean, standard error and standard deviation for that day for this group. We again go to data, we go to data analysis, again descriptive statistics, click OK. The data this time is going to be plant 1 through to plant 5. Be careful, don't select the wrong thing. Take your time and do it correctly. Again, we want it on a new worksheet. We're going to do summary statistics and confidence level for the mean. Doesn't really matter. I'm not really looking at it at the moment. Click OK. It comes up on a new sheet. Again, I really just want these two, so I can copy. I'm going to paste it in for the mean, and remember, go to the home, select just the value, nothing else, and I'll bring it in. So I'm also after my standard deviation. Looks like I've got a fair bit more there than the other one. And I think we will have to have a look at why that happened. It's obviously got a bigger data spread here than we did with the other ones. And again, I'll save it. You need to go and do that again for all of these. And what that allows you to do is you can actually look at the average. You can do a graph of data. If I select this here for day, and I do this for mean, I can do a number of different things. So I'm just going to go and do a little bit of graphing here, just some simple stuff. So one of the ones that I like to use is a scatter plot with, it's like a point graph, and then you make it into smooth lines. So it shows growth without a jagged zigzag sort of pattern here. So let me go and sort of show you one way you can do that. So I might want to put in, say, a scatter plot, and I like this one here in particular. It can be a little problematic if you have labels that are not numerical, but mine are all numerical, so it'll be pretty straightforward. So I click on that, and then I need to add some data to it. So I can select the data, and then what I'm going to do here is I can add a series, and I can then put what data is going into my X and Y axis. So for example, I can then select 15 days. For my X-axis, you always put time on an X-axis, and then you can always select the Y. I'm going to select the mean. So that shows you, for example, a very simple graph to start with that you can see that we've had growth over time. Now, it's interesting, on day 0, we actually have growth, but that's just day 0. It doesn't mean that was the first time it grew. That was the first measurement we had. So maybe I should have called that 1, day 1, etc. But you can certainly play with it, and you can see the growth, but then it tapers off. So what's interesting here is it has actually tapered off over time here. It's no longer growing as fast as it did. Now, why is that? Well, there's a couple of anomalies here. There's a couple of plants that have gone backwards here. So that would be something that sort of stands to me of going, well, we went from 7 centimeters down to 3. That's not normal. You'd expect it to keep growing. This one was fairly consistent. And then we had, so this one plant here has dropped the average from increasing. You'd expect if it kept increasing like the one above it, that I would have had a number considerably higher. So that data, interesting, I would have expected a growth rate to keep going. So that gives you something to talk about straight away. So there's my quick summary. You can do the same for the next group. You can then make all sorts of graphs. You can do the standard error graphs. I'll show you some of those in class. Standard deviation, you can add bars to each of these, and then you can do multiple lines on the same graph to see if there's any correlation or comparative bits on each day. And we'll show you more of that, what it can look like in class. There's lots of help videos on YouTube on how to do a lot of these graphs, and hopefully that helps you a little bit with laying things out.